is November 15, 2024, and we're at Dade City, Florida, doing a Veterans History interview with Lloyd Stanley Mishkel. Lloyd's last name is spelled M-I-S-H-K-E-L. And Lloyd's date of birth is October 27, 1949. And his address is 13954 Thoroughbred Drive, Dade City, Florida, 33525. And the interviewer is myself, Wallace Erickson, and I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I know Lloyd and his wife and my wife. The four of us have been cruisers throughout Europe and Asia, on river cruises and also sea cruises in those areas. Lloyd, what branch of service did you serve in, and what were the dates roughly?
U.S. Navy from August of 74 to August of 1994.
Were you an enlisted member or a commissioned officer?
I was a commissioned officer. I joined the Navy in 74, went through Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island, and commissioned in 76, and retired as a commander in the U.S. Navy in 1994.
Let me back up a little bit to your early life. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Egg Harbor City, New Jersey, and lived there for about 3-4 years. We then moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where my father was going to anesthesia school. And in 1957, my father got a job in Mobile, Alabama, and we moved in January. And I stayed there, went through grade school and high school, went to the University of South Alabama, graduated, and I also taught high school there for 5 years. And I then joined the Navy from there.
Why did you join the Navy then?
I was teaching high school in a Title I school, and I taught math, and I was not happy with the school because it was the students were not showing up for classes. Any one given day, I'd be missing 80 or 90 students out of my classes, and I found it not satisfying. So I started looking for other jobs, tried to get transferred. I could not transfer. So I went to the military, and they were in the process of rifting. The Army, Marines, Air Force was not accepting anybody. Army wasn't accepting anybody. Navy did. I took their exam, and they said I qualified for the Officer Candidate School, and I then applied for it and got accepted.
And where did you attend OCS then?
I attended Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. I started in October of 75 and graduated in April of 76. And from there I attended a few schools and got to my first ship in 1977.
What was the name of your first ship?
My first ship was USS Fortify, MSO, Minesweep Ocean, in Long Beach, California. I was the engineering officer on board. We had 6 officers on board, and I stayed on board until I think it was February of '79.
What was your position on the ship? What did you do?
I was an engineering officer. We had diesel engines and the 4 diesels and electricity, but also the damage control officer. I was also the 3M maintenance guy who was the made sure the planned maintenance for our ship was done for everybody and ran the program for the ship. I had overhauled the ship once, went into a harbor, and we stayed there for 6 months. Went in the dry dock, and because it is a wooden ship with non-metallic metal on board, we had to replace the wood and caulk it, and all the engines got realigned and reworked, and we brought it out with no discrepancies. And what else? I ran the electricians and the DC people, hull people, and whoever else was involved for the minesweeping detail, because the electrician was involved because we had to turn 2 of our diesel engines in the generator so we could provide power for the pulsing of the tail, which is the minesweep tail for magnetic mines.
This is a wood vessel you mentioned. How long would this
The wood vessel
be?
was 162 feet. We had a draft of about 11 feet. Everything was non-metallic, and you'll think about it, we had brass valves, stainless steel, things that were non-magnetic. Now, stainless can be magnetic, but you have to get to a certain quality so it won't be. But your food, which comes in cans, is magnetic. We have to put it in a cabinet and run the degaussing around it to neutralize the metallic cans. We also had a degaussing system for this ship, which would take care of any other personal articles on board the ship that might have been magnetic and give our magnetic signature down to as close to 0 as possible, so we wouldn't set off the mines.
How many personnel were on this ship? How many enlisted and how many officers?
Enlisted, there were, I think, 75, and officer-wise, we had 12 when we were at full complement.
After the USS Fortify, where did you serve, Lloyd?
I left the USS Fortify and went to San Diego, California, to the ASW, or Anti-Submarine Warfare School they had there, and I was en route to the USS Peterson, a Spruance-class destroyer that was still being built in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So therefore, I was on TAD for about 11 months while I was in different schools in San Diego, outside of the Navy base in Chicago. I was in Norfolk, Charleston, Pascagoula, Mississippi, and that is where we ended up, and we commissioned the ship, brought her back to Charleston, and I was the ASW officer for the ship. The sonar and torpedo men were my people, and we had to practice the various things for doing the ASW portion of it and get used to the equipment.
What was the name of the ship you were on at this point?
The USS Peterson.
Peterson?
Correction, USS Thorn, DD 980.
980. Okay.
And part of the things where we used to have to go to Cuba, to Guantanamo, and we went there 4 or 5 times to get trained on the fire control, how to shoot the weapons, are we doing the right things, also practice uploading and downloading equipment or weapons from the ASROC launcher and the torpedoes. We had to shoot our torpedoes and some of the ASROC practices. And one of the sidelights of those trips were we had to go to Newport, Rhode Island. And we participated in the 1980 America's Cup in Newport, Rhode Island. And we were the pivot point, and we stayed there as one of the points the sailboats had to race around. And so we got to stay at Newport, and from there we went back to Norfolk to get degaussed. In other words, when a ship is built, it's steel and iron, and they align all the magnetic waves in the ship so as to have a less part of a signature. They do have a degaussing system, but it helps, but it doesn't alleviate it, all the magnetic signatures. And that's for the purposes of minesweeping and things like that. After that, we went back down to Charleston. After about a year, we got deployed to the U.S. or to the Mediterranean, and we practiced on the way over across the ocean. It was about a 7-day cruise over. We stopped in Portugal, and we got orders to not go to the Med, but we got orders to go down to Liberia in Africa on the west coast. And we were going for the first anniversary of John Doe as president of Liberia. We went down there. It was a 2 or 3 day trip down. Got into port, and we got to visit the people there, and very interesting. And we then finished our thing, got underway, went back into the Med, and cruised over towards Lebanon. We were doing a oval loop off the coast of Lebanon just for protection. We then got some serious threats from Gaddafi in Libya, and we were told to exit at high speed and head that way. As the carrier in the Med at the time, I had sent up a couple of F-14s, and they were giving chase to Gaddafi's airplanes, shot a couple of down, and we then ceased that operation and went back to the Libya area to patrol and watch things. Also, now we're at about 120 days into the cruise, and this was the time when you can get a free beer. Because you were at sea for more than 115 days, I think the estimate was. Never hit a port other than the one down in Africa, but you get a ration of beer, 2 cans. I don't drink beer, but I did enjoy the picnic we had on the deck. We then got to go to numerous ports after that and head back home. We then picked up a training project with Britain and Norway, and this was off Iceland, and we hit the tail end of a hurricane. We had like 30, 40-foot waves that we're going into, and it took 2 or 3 days of just driving and pounding till we got clear of it, and we went back to Norfolk and pulled in the harbor, and that's where the tour ended there for me. I stayed on board 2 or 3 months until I got transferred.
But what were the dates that you were on the Thorn?
I was on board the Thorn I commissioned her in January of '80, and I was on board from then until March of '82. 1982, excuse me. From this assignment on the USS Thorn, I left in March of 1982. I then went back to Norfolk, Virginia, to attend the United Services School, which was a joint tour requirement. I then headed to Tampa, Florida, MacDill Air Force Base, and I was part of Joint Deployment Agency, and my responsibilities was Southwest Asia and the working the plans for deployment with at that time RDJTF, Rapid Deployment Forces. CENTCOM did not exist at that time. And during my tour here at the JDA, I worked with a colonel who was the deployment people, and we worked on the TIPFIDS, time force deployment of the forces. I was a lieutenant, and so from 82 to September of 1985, I was on board. And one of my other responsibilities was defense of the nation, CONUS. Didn't realize at the time that when I went out to Colorado Springs and the activities out there, it was a Navy captain that is responsible for the defense of the nation. We use reserve Navy Air Force and to guard the borders on the northern border and the defenses of other places, and that was the responsibility of getting the forces we needed from the reserves to run that operation. Let's see what else I did. That ended, I turned over and left in September of 1985 to go to school in Newport, Rhode Island. And that was for the department head school and also the executive officer school. And that went from that September through like June of 86.
Okay. And then after June of 86, where were you assigned?
And in June of 1986, I had gotten orders previously to go to the USS Peterson. And I arrived late as my mother had died, and I had gone to the funeral for that, and then I came back to the ship. And I was the operations officer on board. We had been underway, got underway immediately, and I was doing a turnover with the last operations officer, and we had gone through to go to Gitmo for training, so it was a good time for that. And we spent like 4 or 5 weeks down here. We got back, and we started operating, getting ready for deployment in the following year. We were sent over to the Med. We went to Haifa, Israel, and we spent a lot of time at several other ports. That was more of a calm year than we didn't have much gas to run the boat that year, as a matter of fact, because the defense had not allotted enough gas for us, and the carriers were needing overhaul, and I guess the monies weren't there. So we didn't do much of anything during that year on that deployment. Came back, got off the ship, and from there I went to the Panama Canal as a representative for the U.S. Navy down in Panama, and can't remember the name of that city, Panama City, and we worked there for 60 days. And to help with the finding of Noriega. And I got sent back after 2 months to take another set of orders to the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN 72. On that ship, I was the combat operations officer, and we had a lot of TAD to go various schools, how to become a helicopter controller, and also an AIC, aircraft intercept controller, down in Dam Neck, Virginia. And finally reported to the, we were there with the ship because I was watching my quarters get things, so we went through trials on her to make sure she was acceptable to the Navy for what we call trials, sea trials. And we took her out, ran her around, make sure everything was working. Then we took on some planes so that we could use the launch facilities, because it was the new steam boost system for the launched aircraft. And also we had, we accepted the ship, we went and commissioned her, and then we took her out and started running around. And part of those trials to make sure she was still fit, we had some aircraft on board, we launched them, but also we tied them down because then we were on had to do a couple of full power runs to make sure all the equipment and the reactors could get to full speed. Full speed on a carrier is 30 plus knots, but it's one of those harrying times. For instance, on the torque on the shafts, we had to watch carefully because we could, they are long, there are 4 shafts, and we had to monitor how much torque was on each shaft. And as the officer of the deck, I had to watch that and make sure that those things were being observed by the reactor people in the engineering department. We then finish those with satisfactory results. We then went through degaussing, and then we had come back into port. You might want to stop it here for a second. Okay. And as we were coming back into port the previous night, we had a port call with all our people to ensure everybody knew how to get back into port. It's always we have to do that just to make sure everybody knows what's happening, what we're doing, things like that. And so we were coming into port. We were supposed to drop anchor and with 1 shot of chain and anchor at a specific spot. And we had everybody at full attention because we were, wanted to make sure we were getting into port. And first time we ever used the anchor to drop and hold the ship. And so we were anchored, and the navigator kept saying we were on position, but the captain noticed that a buoy was getting awful close, and as a matter of fact, it was alongside the ship, and we were in trouble. At that time, he told me to get the ship underway, and I had a junior officer of the deck that would not respond to me, so I had both the deck and the con to get the ship out of danger. I ordered up 2/3 full, get me out of there. Engineering department probably hated me because they were at rest and not expecting that. And I also called the bosun mate up and the talkers and told them to heave away on the anchor, get it up. And at that time, I, got the ship. I made the ship get underway with 2/3, and I had to watch my speed. So I backed it down and basically got down to about 1/3 ahead and just got headway on. So I had steerage and basically got the ship underway, weaved around, went back in, actually moored her to the pier, and everything went safely, no damage to the ship. And after that, we got underway, and about a month later, got our provisions on board, which was always interesting because we have 6,000 people on board, and I was watching all the stuff come on board. It was amazing. One of the interesting things I saw was when you take Coca-Cola on board, or Pepsi, or whatever you're drinking for sodas, because the guys like sodas, is you take the trailer of Coke off the rig and you bring it to the flight deck. And you have a team of 400 people that go out and offload the trucks. We took on like 5 truckloads of sodas. And what we used the sodas for on board was for recreation fund. And we charged $0.25 a drink. And we were flush with money because you would make about 15, 18 cents a can on these sodas. So anyway, we got underway en route to around the Horn of South America, Tierra del Fuego, to end up in San Francisco, where the ship was going to be at Alameda. And we headed south. We stopped in Martinique, and we anchored there. Stayed about 10 days. No, we didn't. It was about 5 days, excuse me. We then got underway and went down to Rio de Janeiro. And there I brought the ship in, anchored her, and was the CDO for the night. And we spent 9 more days there. So I got to walk down the beaches, but it was during winter, and it was still a little chilly there. And then we got underway and timed our passage around the Tierra del Fuego. The weather was cooperating, it was cool. We had some swells, but nothing serious. And we ended up in Valparaiso for a port call. We got to see Santiago and Valparaiso. We then got underway and headed to San Diego, where we dropped off our aircraft. I also got off the ship at that time and was flown back to Norfolk, Virginia to assume my next duties, which was at the Commander Operational Test and Evaluation of Forces. And that was in 1991. At that point, I was to assume the duties as the Operation Test and Evaluation Officer for the Cruise Missile Support Activity. There was one in Hawaii and one in Norfolk, and it was for the control of the Tomahawk missiles and the programs that were generated to operate those missiles for the Tomahawk and the T-LAMs, the Charlies, the conventional, and also the D version, which was the bomblets. But the plans were downloaded to all the ships that had those type missiles, so that you could call up the missile and launch it with that program in it to do that job or that mission. The equipment was all being renovated to all new equipment with sun TVs, three-dimensional TVs. So you had to wear your glasses for looking at 3D cameras, but also all the electronics. And this is like 1991. So to give you a perspective, we were doing terabytes of information at that time on this equipment, because we had to load up all the different things. For instance, all the towers around, all the buildings, all the hills and mountains and all that stuff, because what would happen was you had a jet jockey that we'd bring in to fly the jet, or in this case, the missile. And what he would do was he'd have a joystick, and he would fly it, and you could see the different things that were flying by. For instance, the tall poles, mountains, valleys, buildings, defense forces of the other people, in other words, missiles, so you wouldn't fly into their zone and be shot down, and also missile and gun sites, and things of interest that you could keep the missile on track. And because at that time we didn't have GPS, so we had to use DSMAC and other things that were stationary to bring up the missiles or the T-LAMs, so we could have them effective. And the DSMAC, and then we had the TERCOM. TERCOM was a rougher estimate of where you were, but then the DSMAC could bring you down into the actual target and what you were trying to hit. For instance, a building might have had air conditioning. It was the computer center for that country, and you could hit just those air conditioners to put them down, because you need air conditioning to run the computers. It gets too hot. For instance, in Iran, Iraq, when you were going up and we were bombing Baghdad, you might have asked the question, why did we go up the road? And we used to call it the yellow brick road, because there were stationary objects. If you cross the desert, there's nothing there. Dunes with wind move around. So you didn't have a stationary target to get a good satisfactory fix of yourself. But if you came up the highway, that, you know, and that's why they'd hear the missile coming in and they start firing, and if they hit it, it usually went off track and hit something on the side of the road. And that's why they said we hit milk factories and other things, but whatever. But that was interesting stuff. I had to also go to Hawaii and monitor that one, and that took a long time because they were just got the equipment. We were just getting it to operational status, and then I retired. And also, when I was at this command, I forgot to mention earlier, was when I got there, the captain of the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln had awarded me, or I was nominated for and received for the Pacific Fleet, the Ship Driver of the Year award. And so I got the nomination and award for that. But it was all very interesting. I retired in the end of August, and also as a point of interest was for me, I smoked cigarettes. I quit before I retired, and that was in '94. And to this day, I have not smoked any cigarettes or any kind of tobacco properties. And I thought that might be of interest to some people in the future when cigarettes are no longer around and people don't smoke them. Thank you.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about life, I guess, in the Navy. To begin with, supplies. Were you able to get adequate supplies?
Yes, we were on the ships that were near the coast of the United States. Supplies were not an issue. For instance, the 2 minesweeps, there was no issues with supplies. We were in and out. Maybe 3 or 4 days of supplies on board, bring the fuel, gas up, and we were good. On the bigger ships like the Thorn, Peterson, we were out at sea and we'd go through what they call an underway replenishment. And we would replace food stuff that we had on board, perishables, milk, vegetables, fruit, things like that that we needed just to feed the people, but also take on 1 million, 2 million gallons of fuel oil so that we could, and on these 2 ships, the Peterson and Thorn, we had gas turbines, so we took on the jet fuel. And we also had a helicopter on board that used it, so that's what we used to operate with. Now, when we got to the carrier, we did the same thing. We had 6,000 people to feed. When we got underway, I gave it a little bit of previous information about how many cans of soda we had to offload by the truckload, but also other provisions of frozen goods. That required about a week of stock, bringing it on board, tucking it away, putting them into the walk-in reefers. And one of the things I found out about that when we were on board the carrier was the pilots and aviators liked their soft ice cream. And I sort of laugh at that because I was a surface ship, I was surface warfare, and when we were eating on board, we always had good food. It was very good food, as a matter of fact, but the aviators, after eating, would get a bowl or a cone full of this soft serve ice cream. And if it was not working, it would soon be working because they would go to the engineering officer and make sure this thing was fixed. Or if we ran out of the the milk product that was put into it, we never seemed to run out of that. But that was sort of funny. But the provisions, when you were like overseas, in the Med, we were always getting fresh food from the shore. If you pulled into a port, we pulled into Majorca, we would get our supplies, but for fresh vegetables, milk, whatever you needed, meat, whatever, chicken, whatever. When you're underway is when you got your fuels for the helicopter or the engines, lube oil. Also, we used to get things break on board a ship. And if you're out at sea, carrier or the destroyers, you'd have, for instance, let's say a sonar go down. It wouldn't be operational. Well, that's one of your main functions. So we'd write what they call a CAS rep. We need this part. And they would find it back in the States or wherever it is, and literally would fly it to you. It can make it to the carrier. They would then send out a helicopter and drop it on board the ship. So you always wanted the carrier near you so that if you had, and that was also the mail carrier. So we didn't have the internet. We didn't have any of the electronics that you have today. We had HF. If you wanted to talk to your wife or somebody or something happened, you could call up the ham operators to connect you to your wife. And you'd get a couple of minutes, but it was tedious at best. Or somebody was having a baby, we'd let them get on the HF and talk via that way to the ham operators. But that was the life on board the ships. We ate well. We did fuel, but we also, got to go ashore. And a lot of these ports, people like to have you. One of the, and before I mention this might be controversial, is about the, when I joined the Navy, they didn't like you. Be dead and gone. The one thing of real note is when I joined in '74, it was not publicly acceptable to be in the military because of the wind down of Vietnam, the problems we had with protest. When you came back from Vietnam, they would call you baby killer, or they spit on you, and you weren't allowed to wear your uniforms, but you sort of stood out because of your haircut. Everybody had long hair, and they were not very nice to you. And that was also true when I went to Newport, Rhode Island. We used to have a base there, and the state of Rhode Island said, "We don't want you here." And that is the reason the Navy made everybody get paid in dollar bills and $2 bills so that they would know how much effect they had on the economy. And Rhode Island told them to shut it down. They did, and the economy of Rhode Island went down very quickly. But it was to drive, but they also built a bridge there too to Newport, Rhode Island, the big one, that the ships couldn't fit under. So there was numerous reasons we never went back. That was just some of the things that people didn't like about the military at the time. Didn't matter whether you were a Marine, Army, Navy, even Coasties got their devil for it. But it made it interesting. Today, when this is 2024, and everybody loves the military and gives you thank you for your service. That was not the case back then. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my tours. I enjoyed the Navy and all the things we did do. And I'm very proud of the American Navy and military.
Right after the service, what did you do? Did you go back to school, or?
Well, I retired and went to join my wife in Birmingham, Alabama, and she worked for IBM. And at that time, and prior to that, I had, before I retired from the Navy, I had gone back to school in the local school there in Newport News to get a degree in air conditioning. And so when I made it back to Birmingham, I started looking around for jobs that were to give me experience in the air conditioning business. I joined one guy, and they taught me a lot. I then went after about a year on my own and was succeeding, but then we moved down to Tampa where we had met and got married. And I started my own business in 1997, and they had no reciprocity with Alabama, so I had to go back and take the exam and pass that, and also get my business license and my other stuff that I needed to open my business. I opened it up, and I was getting busy, so
Was this in Tampa then? Where
this
you
was in
started the
Tampa,
business?
Florida.
Tampa.
And I got my license finally in, what was it, 98? And so I opened up shop in like March of 1998. And was moving along. I was getting busy. And so I hired someone to help me, and he was my helper. And pretty soon I needed a shop. And the wife and I opened up a business and shop, house, home, and she retired from IBM, and she was my office manager and financial control officer. And
Did you have a name for the business?
yeah, this was under Lloyd's Heating and Cooling, and it got very successful. We had about 20 to 25 people at any one given time. I sold the business in 2015 to a Terry Streets, and he bought the name. So it's still in operation here in Tampa, Florida, under Lloyd's Heating and Cooling. And my daughters used to work for me, and they were my runners or pick up the equipment people, and they didn't want anything to do with heating and air conditioning, so I wasn't able to have them take over the business, so that's why I sold it.
Or did you join any veterans organizations or attend any ship reunions?
I didn't join any after-service military organizations like, I can't even think of them.
American Legion?
American Legion or the VFW.
VFW.
But I did, can't even think, put my thoughts together here. I'm drawing a blank.
Did you attend a reunion for the USS Thorn?
Yes, the USS Thorn, she got decommissioned, and we had a reunion, and there was about 100 people who went to the reunion. A lot of the officers that I knew on board, there were 21. Some of them had already died. Some of them were not present. The captain of the ship wasn't present, but it was a nice experience to see some of the enlisted folks that were on board and remember times on board that. And also on the Abraham Lincoln, when we commissioned that ship and also the USS Thorn, I am a plank owner, which tells you that when the ship gets decommissioned, we can take a piece of the deck. In other words, like on a carrier, that's the flight deck. And you get 1 square inch of metal off the deck as a memoir for decommissioning the ship. And that 1 inch a piece of metal off the deck weighs about 5 pounds because it's thick, HY 100, I think it is, steel. It's like 1 inch thick and it's heavy. Now on the Thorn, yeah, I could do the same thing. It got decommissioned, but it is up in Portsmouth, Virginia, in the mothball fleet there. The Abraham Lincoln is still active. She was commissioned in 90, but they'll probably decom her in 2040 because life expectancy is about 50 years. She'll go through a few refueling for nuclear reactors, but hopefully I'm around at that time, but I'll be quite old. And also a couple of the things that we did on board ships were crossing the equator, and you had to get initiated, and you were a polywog until then, and then you were part of the Poseidon people that actually crossed the equator, and I crossed it twice, 3 or 4 times by now, with travels and things like that. But also you get another one for crossing into the Arctic Circle, and crossed that too on her. We were, when I was on the USS Thorn, we went and had the activity up in Iceland. We're running around up there, and we had actually crossed it just to say we did.
Lloyd, is there anything further you want to discuss regarding your service? Any particular events or anything that you think might be good on recording?
I got married. I had gotten divorced during the military and married my present wife, and that was back in 1985, and when I was down at MacDill Air Force Base, and we are still married at this time, and we've had 3 daughters, and they're grown and doing their things and married and grandkids.
What are their names, Lloyd?
There's Rachel and Meredith and Juliana. And otherwise, I've enjoyed all the adventures we've had, and Kaylin got to enjoy a few trips with me when we went to Hawaii, and that's about it.
Well, thank you, Lloyd, for sharing your recollections of your U.S. Navy service with us. This interview is part of the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress, Washington, D.C., which is where the documents and the recording will be housed. I, as the interviewer and video operator, Wallace Erickson is my name, from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And again, we're friends with Lloyd and Lloyd Mishkel, having actually met in Moscow on a river cruise. And we've done several.
We have a lot of good adventures.
Adventures together, travel adventures, both at sea and river cruises.
Also a few typhoons.
Well, thank you again, Lloyd, for spending the time with us.
Hi, thank you.
We're reviewing several photographs here that Lloyd Mishkel has regarding his service in the U.S. Navy. Lloyd, what is the significance of this picture?
This is when I was in Tampa, Florida in 1983, and I was at my soon-to-be wife, and we were all dressed up to enjoy the Oscars.
So this is Kaylin, is that right?
That is her best friend. That was Dell.
Oh.
Kaylin is probably taking a picture.
And who is this?
And that is...
Jeff Pagler, probably.
Who?
Jeff Pagler.
Jeff Pagler. He's the brother of one of the neighbors.
I see. And this obviously...
Now, obviously me in the middle, in my white uniform, dress uniform.
Okay. And what is this picture?
This is a picture of me getting the insignias for Lieutenant Commander in Tampa, Florida. The individual on the left is General Baginski, and my soon-to-be wife, Kaylin, is also attending to help change my rank from lieutenant to lieutenant commander. Okay.
Who's in this photograph?
Okay, and this photograph is the wife and I. She's obviously pregnant. We're in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I believe that's one of the first of 3 daughters.
No, that's the third.
That is the third, excuse me. That's Juliana, and this is about 1989, and she would be born on November 27th of that year. In this photograph, this is the USS Abraham Lincoln being commissioned in Norfolk, Virginia. People on the flight deck here are commissioning the ship, but also the captain's there, a couple other people, Cheney and speakers, before the actual ship comes to life. And this was back in 1989.
And this is Norfolk, Virginia?
Norfolk, Virginia. And in this photograph, this my father and myself. He will be attending the commissioning of the USS Abraham Lincoln. And the man on the sofa is my uncle, and that was my uncle. And he was attending the event also. Bill, Uncle Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This photograph is myself, Lloyd, and Kaylin and I's 3 daughters. This is about 1994, and the daughters are, the one sitting in my lap is Meredith, who has a frown on her face, Rachel, and Julius to the far right. In this photograph is the wife and I, Kaylin and Lloyd, and we're off to the commissioning of the ship. No, this one's a Christmas party, excuse me. And we're all dressed up, and
That's in the 90s.
What
Yep.
year would this have been?
like 92, 93,
Okay.
One or the other.
I don't remember.
In Norfolk, Virginia?
And this would be in, yeah, Norfolk was where the party was. And in this photograph is my retirement shadow box, and I'm unsure who the 2 individuals on either side of me are, but don't recognize them.
But you're in the middle.
I'm in the middle.
Okay.